Hey again everyone, and welcome back to the channel for the next installment in our ongoing new figure showcase series. And if this is the first time you're tuning in, this is a series where we take a quick look at a new addition to the collection. Usually that means a newer release, but sometimes I do go back and look at an older figure. But for today's installment, we're sticking with the MCU and taking a look at the Hot Toys 6-scale version of Kang, based on his appearance in Antman and the Wasp Quantumania. So look, obviously there's a big elefante in the room. Hopefully those of you familiar with Key and Peele got that reference. But let's be honest, due to the actors' actions, right, Marvel had to seriously shift plans that they had set up. So Kang had been slotted to be the lead villain in Avengers Kang Dynasty, which we now know has been reconceptualized to Doomsday, with Robert Downey Jr. making his return to the MCU. So look, we're here to look at the figure, so not going to jump into the issues behind the scenes, except to say that I do feel like this is probably the only version of a cinematic Kang that we're ever going to get. With the shift to Doctor Doom, I just can't see them redoing him. So if you're looking to populate a shelf of Marvel villains and want to add Kang, I really do feel like this might be your only chance. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the figure and see what we're getting here from Hot Toys. And first reaction is, it's a very light release. You're seeing everything laid out here, and it's not much. You do get the alternate head sculpt, which is probably the biggest feature, then a few hands and some effect pieces, including the floating disc, and what almost feels like a way oversized display stand. We've gotten this before with the original Falcon, for example. Once I play with the figure a little bit, I'll get a better sense if the stand is required or not, but just a bit strange, at least at first glance. So I expect this to be a much shorter video overall as a result. Now, first set of accessories I want to take a closer look at are the hands. Look, nothing crazy here, just some splayed out hands and fists. The figure does come preset with some relaxed hands as well. Figure reminds me of just a more basic release overall, like the Hot Toys Vision, for example, or even the Hot Toys Superman figures that aren't accessory intense. Hands are fine with a nice purple glove look and a bit of an armored plate on the back of the hand, or maybe a decorative plate that's just a shiny and metallic looking purple, but nothing earth shattering. Now next up, you do get the effect pieces, and I'll show the figure with them on in the posing section, but you can basically reverse them, having the more narrow end on the fists or the wider end hooked onto the splayed out hand. So they're fine. Hot Toys has been doing a good job with these pieces, and this has that swirl-like effect that is a slightly transparent plastic that's a combination of clear to different shades of blue and silver. I do think it's interesting that it also does include some metallic paint-apps, so it's carrying on that trend we saw with the deluxe store that I just looked at. But they look good, with some nice detailing along the edge of the swirls, creating something that feels like it's moving. The other piece we're getting here is just a simple translucent circular plate that includes some pegs. So this connects to the figure's feet to create the effect of Kang standing on those floating platforms. It's fine, but it honestly feels a little bit cheap. There's some pattern work on the upper surface that's barely perceptible, but I do think Hot Toys could have done a slightly better job here. So now let's get into the figure itself, and we'll start with the Unmasked sculpt first. So my initial reaction is that there's just something off here. I can kind of see the likeness to Jonathan Majors, but there's just something that doesn't look right. Detail's fine. There's some great paint app on the skin and some good detail work on the face, from the brow line to the creases on the forehead. The eyes themselves look good as well, but I think they're the ones throwing off the likeness for me. This does include the rolling eye system, so maybe playing with that will get things looking better. And for me, the standout element here are the two scars running down the sides of his face. So to me, it's just not on par with the other figures we've gotten lately from Hot Toys. However, there is a redeeming factor to me, and that's the second sculpt, which is where things really stand out. So this is, I guess, we'll call it the mask sculpt, although it's just a partial helmet with the blue face, but it looks really great. And for me, it has that more comic look with the blue face that really makes it appealing. Maybe it looks better because it's recreating a slightly more CGI look, which I feel can be easier for these 6-scale companies to recreate, but there's a nice texture here as well, and you also get the scar lines on the side with the white eyes and the purple helmet, and there is a nice light up feature here as well. So it does light up the eyes and the scars, as well as portions around the edge of the face where the face hits the purple helmet. Here's my issue. This is button cell based, so it goes back to that thing we always talk about with these figures, which is it's great for pictures or videos, but are we ever really going to open up display cases to showcase this and flip switches? Especially since you have to remove the sculpt to kind of get to the switch. It's not to say that it's not something that looks good, because the lights are bright, but it just feels antiquated. Now, let's look at the rest of the figure, and you'll notice I'm keeping the mask sculpt on just because I think it looks better. But the figure itself has that screen accurate suit that's also pretty comic accurate, with the purple shoulder pieces and the green suit Now, I have heard that it feels cheap, and I do think that's because of the material choice. It's not a pleather suit, but it feels more like a plastic. It does have some good detail work on the surface, creating some raised pattern lines throughout, along with some decent purple piping that runs down from the top of the tunic to the skirt elements. There is also some decorative plating along the chest that connects to the belt, but it does seem to shift a lot, so it's not always the best looking. Pants are a more similar material to what we've seen before with other figures, with some purple panels throughout. It's funny, but when you look closely at the suit, you realize there is a ton going on here, including the boots, which are split cut. And then they're made of an underlying green material with more of that purple panel, so they carry that throughout. Then you do have a cape, it's wired up, and it is an interesting material. Edges are wired for posing, which helps, but the material is almost lace-like, and at certain times the inner lining is a little translucent. The outer layer has that same pattern that the suit does throughout, with a line down the center that kind of gives you a little break. Texture and pattern work is pretty involved, even though the figure itself, again, it just feels on the simple side. The Vision figure is probably, if you have that, it's the best comparison I can make. But look, figure looks good. It's not going to win any Figure of the Year award because this year has had some really great releases, but I think it really is a solid effort overall, especially with that blue mask sculpt on. Poseability is fairly decent, except for the shoulders. The pauldron he has does restrict movement, so you can't exactly get the arms raised up. For the poses that I have in mind, it's not really much of an issue, but it's worth noting. But overall, I think the figure does pose well, and I get why they added this display base after having it, because I think you needed it to adequately hold up the figure with that blue disc, and you do have to kind of kink the flight pole forward a little bit. That creates a bit of an imbalance, so the larger base makes sense. And for me, I do think that I want him displayed with that platform because it adds a little something extra to the look of the figure, letting you recreate the feel of him floating. I do still think the platform looks cheap. I have to go back and watch the movie, but I feel like they could have done something a little extra, but still works. I also don't mind the effect pieces. They sit well on the hand, and again, just add a little bit of a dynamic element. And like I said when looking at the sculpt, even though the lighted features something you're not really going to use at length, the figure almost doesn't need it, with the white eyes looking sufficiently bright to still stand out in a display. Then throw in the cape, which actually does look pretty good in certain poses, and you get a lot of visually appealing things here. So yeah, I think overall solid figure. Hot Toys dropped this one with little fanfare, whether that was related to them just kind of trying to bury this because of the potential controversy, or if it was just a release they wanted to get out of the way, who knows. For me, I think it still turned out well, but more than anything, it's 100% saved by that mask sculpt, because that one really shines and stands out. And look, my honest thoughts with the state of the MCU and the shift, again, I do think this is the only version of Kang we're going to get as a figure from Hot Toys. Storyline and character didn't seem to be resonating with general audiences, so if you want a Kang figure for your display, I think this is your chance to get one. But again, just my thoughts. So overall, very solid figure. But I am curious to hear what you think. So let me know. And if you are enjoying the content, please consider dropping a like, comment, and subscribing. And we'll touch base on the next video.